As if your life wasn't already interesting enough, then you have a relationship with Mr. Donald Trump. I was wondering if you could...
I wouldn't call it a relationship.
Okay. I was wondering if you could just tell us what happened with him from, I think, meetings originally in 2016 up until now, to just get...
So ordinarily, when a president gets elected of a different party, especially, all of the U.S. attorneys were appointed by the president of the prior administration. You leave in an orderly fashion over a period of time.
Typically, there's a change of the guard when there's a new president.
Yeah, it doesn't happen overnight. It happens over a period of time, and so it's orderly and there's some continuity, in cases are not affected or harmed by the transition process. So I assumed when Donald Trump got elected that was it, and we would be done. And then 8 days later, out of the blue, he contacted the senator for whom I worked just some years earlier, Senator Schumer, and says, "Do you think, Preet would be willing to stay? I think he's terrific." Senator Schumer said, "I think Preet's terrific." And then I had this, odd meeting at President-elect Donald Trump's request to come to Trump Tower and talk with him about staying on, and so I did.
And the whole gang was there, Kushner and
Bannon. Were there to greet me on the 26th floor. When I showed up, the president-elect was running late. And they had a lovely meeting for 15 minutes where he praised the office, praised my work, said good things, said he'd been reading about the work of the office and my work for some time, shook my hand, asked me to stay. And I said I would after I gave a short speech about the independence of the office that I thought it was important for me to say, and how we're not political, and we don't care if you're Democrat or Republican, and presumably you have confidence in me going forward because you like the way we've done the work before, and my commitment is to do the work of the office, lead the office in the same way that I have over the past number of years, and I accepted the offer to continue on for another term. The only weird thing that happened in the meeting, which had consequences later, was that the president-elect pushed over, a yellow pad of Post-its, I don't know what you call them here, but the little stickies,
yeah.
And asked me for my phone number, my office and cell number, which I thought was unusual and odd because clearly somebody had my phone number because that's how the meeting got arranged in the first place. That's how meetings get arranged. And no one seemed to bat an eye, and I obeyed a request from the future commander-in-chief to put my phone numbers on this yellow stickies and pushed it back across the table.
It must have been quite a meeting.
It was. He said, was there press here when you came up? And I said there was. And he said, well, are they going to see you? Did they recognize you? I said, yes, they did. And what I didn't tell him was when I came to the elevator, to the lift,
Nice.
where all the press was gathering behind a velvet rope, someone yelled out, "Mr. Bharara, you're here to serve a subpoena." I didn't tell them they had recognized me. I told them they'd recognized me, but I didn't tell them what the joke was, which is kind of interesting and ironic now that we're 2 years further on, or 2.5 years further on. And then he called me a couple of times, which was odd, given that he should have been busy and certainly too busy to call the sitting United States attorney with whom he had no prior relationship when it sort of goes against the chain of command and the hierarchy. And when that U.S. attorney had and still does have natural jurisdiction over the Trump Organization, the Trump Foundation, various businesses, and other things that are important.
Because it's all based in New York, all that.
It's all based in New York. It doesn't mean that's the exclusive office who could do it, but that's a little bit peculiar. I didn't like it. I thought it was unusual. It set off a red flag in my mind. I advised, actually, President Trump's transition team, the people responsible for the Justice Department transition, that had happened, and made a record of it in my own office, because I didn't know if and when someone was going to say that's untoward, or if the president was ever going to say to do something that I shouldn't do, or ask about a case, or do something that crossed a line. And there's reason to think that might have happened in retrospect. In particular, that Mueller report is full of examples where people in the White House on the staff told the president, don't call the Justice Department, don't have dinner alone with Jim Comey, don't have that conversation, because he has the constitutional authority to do whatever he wants, but it doesn't look good. And it looks like you're trying to short circuit the process. And it looks like you're trying to put a thumb on the scale, potentially, for people who you don't like in one direction, and for people you do like in another direction. And that's bad for him. And then came the time, some weeks after he got inaugurated, that his secretary, the secretary for the White House, called my office on it was March 9th of 2017, left a message that the president would like you to return the call. I consulted with my deputy for an hour, and it might seem odd that you would think twice about returning the call of the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, the head of all government. But I did have pause because I didn't know why he was calling. There was no setup for the call. The Attorney General was not involved in the call. There had been, swirling suggestions about investigating various aspects of Donald Trump's business and his emoluments and the way he was separating his money, and all sorts of things swirling around. How's that going to look? Even if it will appear rude not to return the call, how is it going to look if later people found out, oh yeah, Preet and Trump have been having private conversations to which no one else was privy, while all these other things are swirling about and calls for investigations are happening? That doesn't sound innocent, even if it had been in those instances. And so we decided, after going through all the permutations and possibilities, that I shouldn't return the call, which is not an easy thing to decide when it's the person who obviously will be angry about it and who rightfully would take the position that, well, you only have your job and you're only continuing in it because of me, and you're too rude to return the call. By the way, before I did that, I consulted with Jeff Sessions' office, the Attorney General's office, spoke to his chief of staff, explained the situation. He also, the Attorney General's chief of staff also was taken aback and like, well, I don't know anything about that. And why is the president calling the local U.S. attorney and the Attorney General's office has no idea that the call is taking place? That seemed funny to me at the time and fishy to me at the time. It seems more fishy now, and I like my decision even better now, when you read all these instances where Donald Trump reportedly, and I think credibly, pulled Comey aside and said, I don't want these other guys in the room. Can I have your personal loyalty on one occasion? Can you maybe lay off of the prosecution of Michael Flynn? In a related occasion, that's the kind of thing he did. Now we have reports where Donald Trump is, I think, inappropriately asking people who are in the Justice Department to investigate and maybe prosecute his former rival, Hillary Clinton. That's the kind of thing that he does. And very early on, I became worried about it, and I didn't know how I was going to explain that phone call, even if it was innocent. There was also the occasion, if those people who follow it closely remember, where Loretta Lynch, the then Attorney General, met on an airplane Bill Clinton, because they happened to be at the same airport at the same time on the tarmac. Donald Trump said over and over and over again at campaign rallies, that was inappropriate. They must have discussed the case. The fix was in, because a short time later, Jim Comey announced that there would be no recommendation of a prosecution of Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump himself pointed to a side conversation when a pending thing was going on and said, that's nefarious, that's nefarious. That was in my mind also. So even though there was no good, I think, reaction, I decided not to call him back and call the White House, not to speak to him at least, call the White House secretary back and said, with the agreement of the Attorney General's office, I think it's not appropriate for me to speak to the president, at least not until I know what's going on and it's done through proper channels. And then the next day I was asked to resign.